So welcome to Brand Lab, and as I say, sort of open forum really, and please do ask questions, raise hands, or however it works in Zoom, and sort of, shout out and things like that. But it's something that is really intended to help you understand a little bit more about branding. Those that have met me before have this sort of feeling that sometimes branding can be sort of slightly overcomplicated. This is a mind map of my brain. And so I started this thing about trying to demystify branding and actually trying to explain to people a little bit more about what branding is all about, so that they could actually help and understand more about branding themselves. So this is sort of the way that I've started. And this sort of thing about brand purpose, this presentation I first did about 9 months or so again. And it was someone who just said, Nigel, tell me your story about why you do what you do now and how you got there. And I sort of told them, and they were sort of quite, that's more amazing than I thought it was going to be. And so I put it all together. So I'm going to present this to you, and then we're going to actually give you some sort of practical learning things. And I'll drop in at the end a kind of link to a worksheet that will help you. So is everyone okay for me to go? Any questions? Anyone feeling like, they need to do anything before we start? Excellent. Right. So, like a lot of people, I know there's quite a few creative people in here that have, been doing branding, as well as people who kind of have support from creative people. But my background goes kind of way back, before 1977, but this is the earliest thing that I can find. I used to draw things like any kind of kid. I was 7 years old. And what I find is fascinating about this is that there's there's Guinness, which is now my official favourite drink. I couldn't spell it. There's things like Coca-Cola on there. I think that's spelt wrong. Pepsi, spelt wrong. And all these sort of brands and things, and some sort of weird skyline of New York with a crashing plane and things. So it was all that kind of stuff that I was just doing. I eventually got a bit better at drawing, I guess. Went to school, did O-levels, A-levels and all that sort of stuff. Eventually got some work experience. So I worked for an agency called Trickett and Webb back in the 80s. Well, this was 1990 when I got my first job. I did a placement back with them, which was really good fun. And then started getting into what we call like corporate identity, really. So back in the 90s, it was all about kind of getting the logo done, and I did like large projects like Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors. Towards the end of my sort of career working in agencies, I'd really sort of got to the top of corporate identity, and I rebranded Ford Motor Company, which is a massive project. It was a £1 million sort of project. I had to explain it to so many people what we changed. No one could see the difference, but it actually was a really good kind of learning kind of experience in terms of actually doing something with an immense amount of detail and a big team of people kind of working with us. So then that sort of took me forward to set up my agency. So I set up a company called 300 Million with a couple of mates of mine who are still around doing their own designy type things. And we just formed this agency because we were in like this sort of really sort of kind of rubbishy rock band, I guess you might say. And it's indie rock. Poor Man's New Order was the original name. But we had a lot of fun running an agency. And I always find this picture fascinating. It's 20 years ago, and just the size of the computers and the mess in the studio. I don't know if studios are still that messy, but now we do remote working. We have a little laptop and a mobile phone, and that's about all we need to get going. And so that was a lot of fun, kind of interesting, because it's football today. We did release a football song. We just thought that would be a really good way to get our name out. And yeah, we sort of bothered the charts. We were the Sun's favourite anthem of the year, but got absolutely nowhere, made us no money. But I started getting more into the sort of the strategy side of the project. So working with clients sort of actually a little bit more deeply. We had a design team, and Crisis was one of the sort of bigger projects that I worked on from more of a strategic point of view, and started learning a lot more about understanding clients and then translating what they were saying to us, which in Crisis's case is being homeless is not fucking acceptable, into then visual identity, which is why this Crisis logo has a sort of angry, angular kind of look and feel to it. Carried on doing that sort of stuff. We ended up kind of rebranding this thing called Yotta, a Russian technology business, one of the first ever 4G global brands around technology. And that was an amazing opportunity. They went from 2G to 4G in Russia, so we had to explain what 4G was. But it became a really, really popular brand. Everyone wanted to work for Yotta at one point. Got a bit chaotic. Anyway, as a result of probably getting too much into one massive client, we eventually, come in everyone, welcome newcomers. We eventually ended up closing that business. So that closed in 2012. And I guess that was sort of, the first, one of the first biggest sort of business setbacks, having to close a business. By that point, I think there was 15 to 20 people, a couple of million turnover, but we knew it wasn't going to be sustainable long term. So I went totally independent, started doing my own thing, worked with cancer research, helped them bring that brand to life, got married in 2015, and that sort of was another sort of thing that happened in my life as things started changing, and just carried on doing all my branding stuff, kind of just as things had always been. So I worked on this radio player project, which I managed to get appointed to, which is a thing for BBC, and kind of I was now sort of doing the strategy bit and a little bit of creative stuff, and then normally either just passing it on to their internal teams or maybe just sort of doing a little bit of design myself. And that's where I was 2018, and exactly where I am now, actually. Some of the post-it notes are still the same. Sat at my desk, absolutely just cracking on, doing strategy, doing creativity, being married, blah, 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 and kind of getting on with life. And it was a Friday afternoon, and it was about 6 years ago now, and the lights went off completely. I had a massive cardiac arrest, and I basically had, this is where the 27 minutes comes in from, I had 27 minutes of downtime. And that was the time that I was out. And I'm just going to start a clock so that you can actually sort of see what 27 minutes looks like. Let me just start that going. So this is the time now when I've sort of in cardiac arrest, in an ambulance, being rushed to a hospital. I kind of did wake up about 4 weeks after the event, and it was a very sort of strange experience. And the sort of first thing they do is, you have a very subconscious, I mean, I can talk loads about that if people want to know about that at a different time, but you sort of have this sort of realization of, where are you? And they ask you, do you know where you are? I'm going like, I think I'm in a school, because it's the only thing I could relate about kind of low level lights and things like that. So anyway, I kind of did get back into the world, and obviously left the hospital after they try and get you back home as soon as possible, which, to be honest, isn't a bad thing, because they want you to adjust into the real world. But the real world had really changed. It had become so much more confusing. I mean, these are like, obviously remote controls, but things like remote controls, mobile phones, I really kind of struggled to use. And I was really sort of like, this is just so overwhelming. But I was kind of trying to navigate this world, and someone suggested to me, because I was like, I wasn't working for about probably 18 months, 2 years or so, as I sort of got things together, but they could tell I was getting a bit bored, and they sort of said, why don't you just start writing down everything you know about branding, because you just rabbit on about that all the time. And so that sort of became like a bit of a sort of side thing to keep me out of trouble and keep me sort of occupied. COVID happened, and I'd started thinking that, what, I might do something with this. I'd get back into work. COVID happened, and then all of a sudden, everyone else was faced with the same sort of overwhelm that I had. It was kind of an interesting sort of time. All of a sudden, the world was totally uncertain for everyone. I'm sure you all had your own experiences of that. But I think for me personally, it gave me a little bit of time to reflect and just think about, do I still want to just be at this desk doing what I was doing before? And that's when I started thinking about things a little bit differently and decided that something had to change. And that's what I'm going to sort of share with you, because there's a few things that I think everyone can sort of learn from this experience that you can start to implement today. And I'm a big sort of believer and convert in that, in sort of helping people find their, almost like their personal purpose, but it's normally locked into their business purpose anyway, or their brand purpose, all those things. It's what's inside us that we try and get out there. So I've broken this into 3 stages. First bit about purpose, then about personality, and then about promotion. And for those that have worked in branding, you've really got to understand why this stuff really matters. Why are you bothering to do this? And if you can't really identify a clear purpose around that, you really start to struggle with justifying why you get up and keep on going through the slog and getting through the overwhelm. The second bit, personality, I think it's the bit that kind of I hadn't really been bothered with before, that actually makes it more special to you, but also more special to other people. And actually, surprisingly, although not surprisingly if anyone's a branding person here from corporate brand world, promoting it, I hadn't really shared much of what I did, apart from the odd case study here and there, because that's the only thing that we used to put out. Hey, we've spent six months on a project, here's a 1-page PDF of all the stuff. And I'd never really talked about my personal view on branding and promoting it or anything. And I sort of, I'd sort of purposely hidden away a little bit. So first bit, purpose. Now, I think you can cut through this quite quickly because some of you will see this, but the thing that I really discovered is that, like I said at the start, branding is overly complicated. And I think this was coming from the overwhelm that I was having kind of trying to use remote controls and things like that. And this is why I came up with my purpose, is that branding is overly complicated. So I'm going to demystify the process because I believe that business owners have the answers. And any project I've done, whether it's been a big bit of research for a law firm, we're always talking to customers and clients and getting their insight and point of view into it. And that's the same with any sort of business. If you're just doing design for your own sake and making things look cool because you like the way it looks, you're not getting into the real thing that's behind what that brand and that business is all about. So this is where I came to, I can help untangle your brand, and which creates clarity for your audience, makes it more relevant, unique and memorable. And that sort of literally spun out to a whole bunch of things that I sort of share and teach now about, brands are more than logos, but it doesn't matter. Just get out there. And if you've got a business idea, get a logo, stick it on a website, get selling, get making some money, testing it for 6 months, 12 months, and then start to develop a brand. Because a brand is a lot more complicated than the logo. And so these things are a lot of bits and pieces that I've all brought together. I've been using like a circle to talk about things for about, 20 years probably since we started 300 million. And I'd never called it a donut before, but someone kept calling it a donut in a client meeting actually. And so I just thought, why not just call it a donut outside a client meeting? So the brand donut is just a model. Every brand person probably has some sort of model. They've all got more or less the same sort of questions. They're structured in slightly different ways, pyramids or houses or whatever. But, ask about your vision, your positioning, competitors, etc. Offer, values, mission, glue it all together with the jam at the centre. And these things become a little bit more tactile and a bit more useful for me now. And that's what came into the Untangle Your Brand, which is really just my philosophy kind of put into a whole bunch of products and services that I now deliver to people. Anyway, and it's interesting. I do a lot with independent solo business owners, but it's also small businesses and those sort of companies of just limited resource, but want to not just sort of get their brand done, but also understand more about branding as they go. What I like about it is that actually some of the tools and techniques I've started using again with corporate clients, and it just makes it easier. I did a whole presentation about positioning last year. We were trying to sort of explain about brand architecture and stuff, and I explained it using kind of different flavors of crisps rather than some of the more technical models, and they just got it much more easily, and sort of it's breaking through the barriers. The second part I want to talk about is all about personality and about not playing it safe. And I think that I'd probably been in my career 25 years by this point, 20 years, let's say 25. And I think I'd probably played it a little bit safe. And what happened in lockdown, it happened to us all, we all experienced this, sitting in a Zoom room. And then everyone sort of kind of like having these very stilted conversations. And the kind of questions then started going on about, what's that in your background? What is that behind you? Well, it's a bunch of records. They are actual records, things that I've bought since the age of 10. And people were then suddenly much more connected, much more interested in what I was saying and doing, because they started asking about my records and the lights came on. And I was like, well, that's really surprising because, I've never shared it with anyone. So for 30, since I was 10, I just had them in my room and catalogued them away and sort of filed them into neat little orders. So I started using that as a way to explain branding. And this is just the micro kind of thing about, the what kind of thing, is all being about, what is it that you're offering, you selling the products and services. If my record collection was a brand, it's a collection of records, 7-inch singles, 12-inch singles, LPs, how do I differentiate that? The second most important thing, what's unique about it? Well, it's my personal curation. I've bought them since I was 10. And why do I do it? Because I really do feel like I want to sit there one day and just let the sound waft over me in that emotional connection. So I started using it to kind of do the what, how, why thing about branding, record collection, personal collection for the now and for the future, thinking about all those things that we talk about in branding terms, but just using something that I was quite passionate about, that people had a connection with. And then I also, for those that live locally, if anyone's in Southeast London, started to kind of create this thing called Vinylly Fridays. When I came out of hospital, someone said, Nigel, you need something to do because you're not doing anything. Well, I was doing stuff, but I was sort of meandering around a little bit, writing lots of things on Post-it notes. But so we started at this thing called Vinylly Friday, which is a regular night where we play vinyl records. It says what it is on the tin. It's in the local pub. It's actually in 2 local pubs now. We do it in 2 venues on the same night. We've got different DJs that are all part of it. And that's become quite a sort of kind of unifying thing for me to kind of create my sort of idyllic kind of music night and actually hear the response from people that have gone to the nights, and created this sort of community around it. And people kind of, because again, it certainly sort of in between lockdown and stuff like that, people hadn't really experienced going out the same, or they hadn't been out to as many venues and things like that, and just getting people together, playing records and having a bit of a laugh. And so Vinylly Friday is something that, I'm really proud of doing. I think what I would take out of this is that you can combine your professional experiences in with your personal experiences as well. So I always ask this question: describe your favourite artist in 4 words or less. Now, people think that's just because I'm into music, but it really helps me when I'm talking to people. So I'm not going to do this now, but maybe at the end someone might venture it. So if I ask someone to describe their favourite artist in a few words, they can generally do it in 4 words. And, they'll talk about David Bowie, or they'll talk about Queen, or Dolly Parton, or whatever. So for me, Adam and the Ants, pirate glamour, punk rock. When you then ask them to talk about their business in 4 words or less, they start to ramble, because they don't know it as much as they actually know their own story about the things that they have that connection with. So it's just a way into actually starting to get that conversation. So all the sort of people that I've met recently, it doesn't matter who they meet, they've got words that help describe their emotional connection to these artists. And all we're trying to do is say, right, if you can do it for Taylor Swift, you can do it for yourself and your own brand, your own business, because you've been doing it so long in your business. So there's some of the artists that people, these are definitely some of the more popular ones. Every now and then we get something a bit obscure, but people love these sort of artists. They love the sort of the values that, say, John Lennon might bring versus what Prince might do, and people associate these things. And the chances are, if that's within your personality, it's also within your business. I'm going to give you like a summary type worksheet at the end that you can download that has these prompts that I suggest that, if you, I sometimes say to people, like, just ramble on about your favourite band, if you like, and then write it in 4 words. But most people can get it to 4 words. But what I would think about is what passion you can bring to your profession, but also in a relevance way, because, it's got to have some sort of, glue to it all. Next thing is all about promotion. Don't keep it a secret. And this was quite an interesting thing, because, again, I'd never really sort of pushed what we're doing apart from some very general corporate things. So back to all my Post-it notes, I decided in lockdown to create a course, put all of those things into 6 15-minute videos. Now, what was really good, apart from the fact it took me quite a long time, even though there's like an hour's and a half's worth of content, it kept me quiet. I'm sure my wife was happy. But also, it then became all the content that I needed for everything that I do and touch, in terms of actually trying to tell people about different bits of branding, whether it's about proposition, whether it's about naming, whether it's about visual identity, brand architecture. There's like worksheets and 15-minute video of me sort of talking about it. So I use those as tools to kind of help and educate people. But I did opt to give it away free. I did think at one point, why don't I just sell it for $49 to 1 million people and become super rich? It was just too much hard work. It was so hard work. It was distracting from actually doing the proper job, which I like doing, which is brand strategy and creativity. But I think giving it away is much more useful, because it will help and support the people who need it the most, who can't actually pay £500 or £1,000 or whatever it might be. So there's no point in trying to sell them something for £49, because they probably can't afford that. So I kind of give it away, and it's turned into a whole kind of series of these presentations and bits and pieces that I use. I did some print versions of it and gave these away to people, which is nice too. There's the first bit of print I'd probably done in 20 years, to be fair. And it was quite nice to actually sort of do something creative. And again, the sort of things that I would do around here is you're thinking about what you do. So in design, we always talk about design, define, discover, deliver, and all that sort of stuff. I think I would encourage people to think about your processes, think about the things that you do, just get them all down, all the other stuff. And then think about how you can make them more unique and memorable and ownable to yourself. So for me, that's when I came up with Insight, Story, Engage. I came up with the brand donut, the brand jigsaw. But you will have terminology and things that you do that are everyday processes that can actually reflect a little bit more about who you are and what you do. And then I'd always encourage you to think about the thing that offers people the most value that you can give away. Bearing in mind that obviously you don't give away your time, because that is the most expensive thing. So you've got to be really reserved on that. But worksheets, video courses, those sort of things that are just generally going to help people would really sort of benefit you and the world. And I think that's the sort of thing. It's like, well, so what does that all mean? What have we achieved by doing all that? And I think for me personally, when I sort of look back at it, and obviously this was all done from a reflection on what nearly happened. This can be sort of done at any point, really. Is that do not wait to find your purpose. And we're going to go through a little workshop. And if there's a volunteer who wants to be part of it, we can do that. We don't need to, but I'll explain it in my terms. Is identify what's going wrong and how you can change it. And for me, it was all about, I just thought, the world's gone too complicated. I've got to make the world simpler. That was my sort of thought process. Nothing sort of bigger than that, but it was my personal experience. And I think, when I started thinking about it, I think I'd sort of seen my parents, they're in their 80s. My father died, but, they couldn't my dad could never use a smartphone. He just couldn't get his head around it. And actually, I think there is things around that are just too complicated for too many people. We're experts in a lot of things, but we have to be able to kind of and that was my sort of personal gripe. People will have different things that they think need sorting out in the world. And it doesn't need to be like, I want to save the planet, it's something that's maybe a little bit more tangible. I think don't play it safe. Again, I think we do sometimes hide ourselves, all that sort of, fear of failure and, not wanting to put ourselves out there kind of creates barriers, but just put it out there. To be honest, I found the more I put out, the less people care. And actually, I've obviously got my standards. I want it to be good, but I'm just happy putting stuff out there. But adding that passion into my profession has actually made it kind of fun. And just don't keep it secret. Give away as much as you can to help others. And that's sort of one of my big mantras now. Obviously I'm still commercial. I've still got to win work. I've still got to make money. I've still got to pay the mortgage. But, there's ways that I do that are through the bigger branding strategy projects or whatever that might be. It's not just about, if I can give 10 minutes of help to someone, then I will do. And I think overall, by combining those, I found personally the work that I do just more enjoyable. I've found it a lot more fun. It's more meaningful, and it's become more beneficial to people that are receiving it. And I think that's what we're all trying to do as business owners, whether you're a brand person, whether you're a coach, whether you're an entrepreneur, whatever you might be. We want our sort of world to be actually a lot more pleasurable for ourselves so that we can deliver that for other people. So I'm just going to explain this in a little bit more detail. And this is a worksheet on how to find your purpose. And I'll just sort of go through it. Is like, think of that real world problem. What is going wrong out there? And, what is your sort of, they call it lived experience. For me, it was everything's too complicated. And that was sort of the jumping off point for actually then starting to think, well, how can I fix it? And, the change that I can make is all about, actually the, simplification. I know so much about branding. I can simplify a lot of things. And then you say, well, why does that really matter? Because then businesses are empowered to understand more. And then actually summarizing that back down, a bit like Adam and the Ants and stuff, demystifying the branding process to provide clarity and direction is kind of where I came to as my personal purpose. And I think that's what I know that everyone in this room could have a go at doing, and actually then feeling kind of sort of empowered with what they are doing as well. So I think that's we've got 8 minutes left in our final 8 minutes. So I was still kind of under. Well, I don't know what was happening. I think at this point they were probably sticking anything they could inside me. But at this point we can kind of stop the screen share, and I can answer any questions that you might have about that. Oh,
Thank
hello.
you, Nigel. That was awesome. And the purpose question, obviously, for me is like shockingly not there
Yeah,
originally. I think it's because I try to stay out of politics. There's a lot wrong with the world, but like, what do I personally care about? How does that relate to what I do
yeah.
was the challenge. And I think I finally nailed it.
So do you
And
want
that
to
there, yeah,
have a
yeah,
go at doing it live and
yeah.
see where we come
Let's
out?
do it.
So we come out with, and we've got time to do this. So welcome everyone else who's turned up whilst we've been away. It's great to see you all. So Jane, what do you think is wrong? What's sort of like your kind of thing that you think, oh, that needs fixing? So
I
what
think I finally landed on there's not enough magic in the world.
not enough magic? Love it.
Not enough magic.
And how are you going to fix that?
By making magic. That's a good
Okay,
question.
and
I think it
yeah,
might be they're bringing the magic and we're gathering the flock for them.
they bring the magic. So when you say they, your clients bring magic,
Like the magic is inside them and their
magic inside them.
story. And yeah,
So when you say the magic that's inside them, how would you express that? Really,
I
sort
would
of dig.
say, what's something that brings you an immense sense of joy? I
Yeah,
want to know what they do when they're not working. I want to know
yeah,
what their clients are feeling. But
yeah,
so I'm all up in my head. I'm the worst client for myself.
yeah. So bringing out their joy was something that you mentioned there. So, and why
Yeah.
does it matter that you kind of bring out their joy? What's that going to do?
Okay. Well, I think the world is, it's rough out there for a lot of people,
Yeah,
and everyone's doing their own thing and walking in their own shoes. But ultimately, um, the daily grind in life
yeah,
can really wear us out and
yeah,
burn us out. And that shows up in our work, that shows up with our relationships. And so
yeah. So what's that?
I
What's
want
going?
them to feel empowered.
Yeah. So what's that going to mean for them?
Um, More money.
Yeah, yeah. Success.
Uh,
Yeah,
yeah, whatever success
yeah.
looks like for them.
So, and again, without sort of this saying this is what your purpose is, but the fact that you are identifying that bringing joy and magic from the world will bring your own success or something like that is something that will resonate with people,
Okay.
and it should sort of lead you to actually make sure, right, I'm not finding the joyful bits, I'm not finding the magical bits, therefore I'm not kind of creating my own success and sort of doing that. And that's sort of, I think that's the sort of direction. I know that you've got a business, brand Swan, and I know you use the descriptor that people flock to, but that might help you think about why people flock to it rather than just the action of flocking to it. They flock to it to find their joy and magic and create their own success. So,
I think we're drawn to it.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that was sort of my experience. Has anyone got any questions that they want to ask about that? And before we kind of move on, just feel free to raise your hand, throw in a question. I'll put in the. This might be really distracting for people, but I'll put it in now. Here's a link to a PDF. I'll send this to you on the on the follow up email though, so you can see that. Let me just put that link in there. I mean, do people feel that they have a sense of their purpose, or that getting your purpose matters? Yeah, yeah,
So
yes.
I get why purpose matters, but sense of my purpose is quite difficult to identify. And Nigel, we had a conversation about this, and so I'm helping, like yourself, a small business to understand their what, how, why. Um, and I'm kind of learning. So I've always worked in the corporate world. I've
Mm,
not done a small business for myself. And it's where, where you said time is your most valuable asset. So you can give away stuff because you want to help people. I'm giving away my time because I want to learn what the best process is
Yeah.
and discovering how I work
Yeah.
and what matters. So I've identified that while I was doing the kind of discovery stage for one of my clients, is I've really got into like their fears and their emotions and like to
Yeah.
identify their values and what their beliefs are, the true beliefs, so then I can kind of get to understand their personality and what makes them tick and stuff like that. But what you've said, given in terms of that purpose, how to define it is much more of a positive way. So I feel like I need to wrangle back and
Yeah.
kind of
I think,
identify.
yeah, I
So
think that's it, because you're saying, oh, this is a problem, but you're putting a fix that's going to give a sort of positive benefit to people. I'd also say in the sort of terms of giving away time, I think absolutely when you're starting out, testing things is really important. So I definitely have tested lots of things, but make sure you're getting something back for it from them. And because if they're not giving you money, whether that's an endorsement or whether it's giving them some connections, something that's going to help you in some other way. Otherwise, you will find quite quickly that you give away a lot of experience and don't get much, because
yeah,
I suspect that once you've been through your process a few people a couple of times to prove that you don't feel like an idiot doing it or whatever, you'll be really comfortable doing it in a way in a way where they might pay for it, where you don't have to do it for free. But that might only take 2 or 3 goes, but it might still keep evolving for the next 5 or 10 goes. But you should
yeah.
start having it in a more professional part, or at least leading on to some sort of paid type thing as well. So
I'm absolutely enjoying myself while
well,
I'm doing
well,
it. And
people, yeah,
it's
people will enjoy, because you do, because this is, this is what we do. This is in our hearts and stuff like that. But you also need to make money. You need to,
yeah.
pay the bills. And to be honest, that's my struggle. My wife's always saying, "Did you charge for that thing that you just did?" I quite enjoyed it though. And that's never going to get me very far, is it? So yeah, keep doing that.
Yeah.
Any more questions? We've got another 1 minute, and then that one is
Just a very quick comment. I think it's important, even in I'm learning that it's important to just charge even a little bit and to get in the practice of charging. And then as you scale up, it is a challenge to then scale something that you didn't charge very much for into something that's big and substantial. But I think the practice of charging is important sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you can't really sort what would be difficult for me, say, is like take my online tools and then start saying, actually, now that I've given it away for a year, I'm going to start charging $20 or something. That ship has passed now. Forget about it. I'd have to do something significantly different, but I don't think I would do that. I think what I would recommend, if depending what stage your business is having things that are quite buyable, that will give a lot of value, which is typically you don't the discovery call type stuff. You shouldn't really be doing and giving away for free if you can avoid it. It should be part of a paid for type process. It's a bit like we always had this thing about free pitching and stuff. There you go. That's the 27 minutes over. Boom. There you go. Let's check that off. There you go. Came back to life. There you go. Nigel came back to life. Yeah. So just be sort of conscious. Yeah. So we've all been through the free pitching type thing. We know that's bad, but then we can't help it because we want to win the work. And if the reward's worth it, then we might do something that we probably shouldn't be doing. Is Wendy in the room? I think I saw Wendy come in. Is Wendy in the room? No, can't see it. So I did get a question. So for some of you that joined more recently or signed up more recently, I sent out an email saying, have you got a question? And Wendy asked me a question. So I'm going to answer Wendy's question. I thought she'd come into the room. Are you there, Wendy? Can't see you now. Maybe I didn't let her in. She's going to shout at me later or something. Right. Wendy, I'm going to pretend that you're in the room with you. It's lovely to see you. I think you're in Florida, so how is sunny Florida? Although you sent me a text message saying it was raining, so sorry about that. So your question to me was, and sort of kind of picks up on this. So I always do this in the brand lab. I have sort of a bit of sort of teaching, not normally as long as that, by the way. It's more about questions and helping people. And Wendy's question was, my brand is missing my story, or so I'm told. Where does story belong? Hope you don't say everywhere. Lots of love, Wendy. It probably was written in that kind of way. And, story is something that we talk about a lot, storytelling, and it is without doubt, the sort of, it's the thing that engages people once you've got that story. And I'm just going to explain this a little bit slower than I did at the start. So branding is quite complicated. And so you've got to break it down, but you've got to get going. So you do have your idea, you do get out there with your logo, business cards or whatever, and just start trading, start selling and start doing things. You then need to building everything else. And I break this into three sides. First is the insight to make it relevant. Second is the story to make it unique. And the third is the engagement to make it memorable. And the truth is that you have to know a little bit of the background before you can start telling the story. So in my donut, the positioning and the vision are all the things that are giving me the insight type triggers. So you've got to do that homework. A lot of it might be quite instinctive. You might already know these things. You might have to do a little bit of research. You don't need to do a lot of research. Then you can focus on story, which is all about making it unique. So this is like your offer. What is unique about your offer that no one else is giving? Values. What is important that you believe that, sets you aside from someone else? We can't have, we're all different. We're all individual people, and we have our own sort of beliefs that guide us that are going to actually relate to your specific audience. And then finally, the mission, which are the actions and activities, the skills that you bring, if you like, that deliver your vision. And these are the things that, could be your superpower, sometimes people call it. And again, these are going to be unique to you. So if you really focus in on the offer, the values and the mission, you'll get something that's much more unique. And that then can lead into what then becomes your external story, which is the messaging that takes that out. So which is why you then get verbal identity and visual identity. There's another sort of benefit to understanding your story. And when I do a donut, I scribble everything on a single page and then try and summarize that into like a meaningful paragraph. You could call it a brand proposition. There's lots of different sort of fancy words for it, but it's really trying to summarize benefits, strengths, all those things that you've learned from your insight and kind of detailing your offer into as simple as sort of group of sentences as possible. But there's other reasons why creating a story matter. Now, okay, Wendy asked, are you going to use it everywhere? Well, I think it's about the sort of tactical deployment of your story. And obviously people talk about sales, marketing, branding, and how does like branding and sales combine? This is a different part of the jigsaw, just to sort of explain that. I'm not a sales strategist, but I sort of understand a bit about sales, and there is a bit of a process to go through. You need to set your objectives. You need to think about who the audience you're trying to reach. You need to think about what your story is, what your message is you're going to send to them, the tactics that you're going to share that story with, and eventually with sales stuff, you normally put in some sort of metrics so you can measure the success. And if you think about it, if you just look at this as a whole, is that when you're setting your objectives, these are very sort of kind of very practical things. Am I building awareness? Am I converting sales, for instance? How am I going to understand the audience? I'm going to be market-led, segment-led, what are the roles led, or whatever. These are all things that you just sort of almost like checkbox makes decisions about. It's then when you come to your brand story and thinking about your core, your proposition, your sort of, all the benefits, it's how you then tailor those to that specific kind of part of what you're trying to do. So you don't use the full story everywhere, you use the right bit of the story in the right place, because you're going to deploy it in different ways. Either it's going to be direct messaging, or that could be a targeted email, or it's going to be more indirect, which is going to be an audience that might be seeing a Facebook ad or something. And again, your messaging is going to have to sort of change to reflect that. And so this is why having the story is important. But to answer the question very specifically, it's about using the right bit of the story in the right place at the right time that actually is going to make sure there's some variety. But because you've brought it all from the brand donut, there's a really strong core and resonance and belief with it all. So hopefully that answers Wendy's question. I don't think Wendy is here, is she? I definitely clicked on Wendy's thing. But anyone got any thoughts about brand? I mean, I know there's a few sort of storytelling type people here. What would your tip to be for Wendy about how to use brand stories? Anyone? Oh, we've got Katie. Katie. Oh no, Katie's giving a round of applause on that. I thought you were going to ask a question. Anyone got any thoughts on brand? Yeah. So Helen. Yeah. Hi, Helen.
Yeah, so in terms of picking out the bit of the story that's relevant, that seems like a really good idea. I teach healthcare professionals who have English as their second language, and there's a couple of elements of my story that resonate probably with different ways. So I've lived as an expat for 16 years in Japan, so I understand the frustration of not being able to communicate. That's one element, that might bridge something. And then I've failed as a language learner. I failed failed many times. So I've, and I'm reluctant to share that being a language teacher, but maybe I think it makes, I've also shared things like how I failed my driving test 3 times. Their ears prick up. They just love it. They absolutely love hearing things like that. And then the other side is that I was a patient of a very sick the child of a sick parent for a long time. Yeah. But one thing I will say is just, do you think people are sort of encouraged to make their story something they're not? To sort of self-exoticize themselves in a way that people know the game that's being played, and so they can say, oh yeah, of course they're going to say that they lived as sometimes I feel like there's a bit of cynicism or resistance. I
think there is. I think you have to be a bit careful with what we call sometimes pity stories. Okay. I'll use this as an example of someone that always uses this. It's like, I was sat at the edge of my bed eating my last pot noodle with my 5-year-old child, and we had no work to do. Now I'm a multimillionaire, look at my sports cars, and I can now show you how to make that happen. Those sort of stories, whilst they may well be true, they're so sort of out there that people will start to disconnect with them. Now, what was interesting about what you're saying is that the thing that you said about failure actually probably, I'm guessing, has a bit of success around it. But it's just a small story that actually can help people understand a point that then will actually help them move forward. So definitely, I don't really look at it. This isn't like a movie narrative arc that you're taking people through. This is more like a collection of short stories that actually have some sort of common themes here and there, and they're glued together by your brand core, the essence of who you are and what you do, rather than being, you've got to see episode 1 and stay with us all the way through. Otherwise, it would become quite challenging, I think. And again, big brands will just tell you the bit that's going to hit you the hardest in the place where they want you to hit it. And they'll give you either a snippet of a story or the long version. And that's all you're doing with all your communications. Back to that thing about sales, is that whatever the tactic is that you're going with it, will need the story to be adjusted to suit the way that it's being sold. You can't put the same thing out on the same thing everywhere. It can't be that homogeneous, really. So hopefully that helps with that.
It's more like we should think of ourselves as being anthologies.
Yeah, I mean that's a nice sort of example. You're an anthology, and again, if use just like a band example. So the Beatles collections was called the anthologies. They had anthology 1, anthology 2. Well, why wasn't it all in anthology 1? Why is there multiple anthologies? But let's not get into that. But the thread of the story through the Beatles, but you could actually pick into a track. I mean, personally, I hate greatest hits albums. Let's not get onto that either. But what I hate most is shuffle, things on shuffle. But actually, when you know something so well, like the Beatles' back catalogue, picking 1 or 2 bits out of it here and there aren't going to ruin your musical experience of understanding the Beatles. If you want to go on the dedicated story of how they went from Germany to mega global success, you've got to view it in a slightly different way. So that's why, sometimes you do need the full narrative arc. And I think leaving on that, I've got one hand up. So, hi, Katie. You have a question?
Yeah, actually, no, it's not a question. I just
Oh,
wanted to add to what you were saying to Helen, because you know me, Nigel, I do a similar role to
yeah,
you, so it's really interesting to hear your approach and take on it, because it's certainly something that's much harder to do for yourself than it is to do for someone else. So everybody,
yeah.
every
Oh,
creative person, everyone knows that it's a nightmare doing it for yourself. That's why sometimes asking for an outside opinion is really valid. And what I think was really interesting with your take on you saying that you failed at learning languages sometimes. I think that that story for the right customer, if you've got someone who's learning a language, you'll have a high proportion of people that are probably quite intimidated or nervous and anxious about that. They're the people that you tell that story to, for instance, because that's going to make them feel much more comfortable to some extent. You have to obviously back it up with your success at doing it. But I think that it's actually a really interesting hook, because a lot of customers I've dealt with in the past, a lot of it is trying to make their target audience feel unintimidated. So non-intimidation is like a big core strength. You can pull it out in the right way. But you know, you have to bear in mind, for some people, they want confidence that you're an amazing teacher. So you probably wouldn't necessarily say that to everyone. But it's certainly something you can use and build a story around about, you know, how it drove you to perfect your
yeah.
process and all those other things. There's so many ways you can weave that into different posts.
Yeah, and I think, you know, going back to answering Wendy's specific thing, story is really important. How you use it is massively important, and not telling all the story all the time. And I think that maybe was sort of Wendy's undercurrent of, do I have to put the whole story everywhere all the time? No, you need to pick out the right bit.
Yeah, definitely. Right time, right place as well.
Exactly. So I'm just going to do the final bit. So again, those of you that know me, I'm not going to actually. I don't need to put. So the last bit I do is band news. I always do this with do my live events. I started actually. This is a classic example. So the DBA, which Katie, you're a member of, and Bridget, you a member of as well, I think, is the Design Business Association, and they started doing events during lockdown. And it was the classic thing, Nigel, what are all those things behind you? They're records. What, real records? Yes, of course they are. Why would I get a picture of records? And I said, oh, well, what are you listening to? And then I started doing little music reviews at the end of each of the sessions. So I've kept that going on my other sessions. So I've got a record review for you this week. So this is an album by an artist called Peggy Gou. I don't know if anyone's familiar with her. Now, she started off as probably some sort of model, kind of fashion superstar type person, started doing DJing, and she's got this new album that came out last week called I Hear You. Now, if you know Peggy Gou, she's very cool, South Korea, and she has had some absolute banging tracks out in the last couple of years. I Go and the Nana song, and particularly, and I think the album, if I'm being totally honest, is really disappointing. It's really disappointing, because the hype around it, you just think, wow, this is going to be amazing. She's so cool. Their songs are so great. And it made me think there's another album out. There's an album celebrating its 25th anniversary this month, which some of you will know, by an artist called Moby. The album's called Play, which is a really iconic kind of crossover sort of, you know, this sort of kind of weirdy, geeky, DJ kind of guy suddenly made an album. And that album should have been that. It should have been that iconic. I'm not even convinced it will grow on you in that way, but I would definitely listen to it. I'm going to see if I can quickly get the link, and I'll put that in. But the links will be in the in the follow-up notes, the show notes, or whatever you want to call them. But I would definitely listen to it. I would definitely, you know, add to all your playlists you know, the banging tunes. And I do sort of feel that if anyone's having like a barbecue this summer or whatever, and you want kind of a bit of instant cool at your party, just put this on, and people will think they're at the coolest party. But it's, you know, the album's a bit disappointing. So thank you very much for coming to this month's Brand Lab. It's great, and I'm really pleased that I brought this back. I'm going to do it every month. If you're in London, you can come to my fixed thing at Zest, which is down in the Design District, which this month was all about. We had someone playing the guitar. We had people talking about the music business. Next month we're doing stuff around getting your book published and the pitfalls of that sort of thing. That's in person, but I also recognise that not everyone can go to all the in-person events that I do, so that's why I brought Brand Lab back. So thank you very much. Hopefully got all your questions answered. If there's anything you want, just follow up with me, and I look forward to seeing you the next time. Enjoy the football. For those of you, those in the States who don't care about football, enjoy whatever you're going to do next that's more enjoyable than watching England struggle through a game that they should win.